I watched my husband walk into that hotel room with her, and I knew, tonight, his perfect life ends. What happens when a woman stops playing the victim and becomes the hunter? When suspicion turns into certainty, and certainty becomes calculated revenge? I'm Mara Ellison, and for 6 months I've been the perfect wife to a man who thought I was blind. Tonight I followed him to the top floor of the Grandmont Hotel. Tonight I kicked down a door. And tonight, everything Victor Hale built, his reputation, his empire, his carefully crafted lies, came crashing down in one devastating moment. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Grandmont Hotel glittered like a jewel box that Friday night, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers throwing fractured light across walls covered in gold-flecked wallpaper. Outside, Chicago's winter pressed against the windows, but inside the Metropolitan Ballroom, 300 bodies generated enough heat to fog the glass. The annual Hale Industries Gala. Victor's crowning achievement every year, a chance to parade his success in front of investors, rivals, and anyone else who mattered in his world. I stood near the champagne fountain in a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent, emerald silk that Victor's stylist had chosen because it complemented my complexion. My hand wrapped around the stem of a flute I hadn't sipped from in 20 minutes. The bubbles had gone flat. I watched them die one by one, clinging to the glass. Mara, darling, you look absolutely radiant. Patricia Drummond, wife of Victor's CFO, materialized at my elbow. Her smile was all veneers and Botox, the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. I'd perfected the same expression years ago. Patricia, that's a stunning necklace. It wasn't. It looked like something a child had made from costume jewelry and desperation. Oh, this old thing? She touched it like it might bite. Richard surprised me for our anniversary, 23 years. Congratulations. The word tasted like metal. She leaned in, lowering her voice to that conspiratorial whisper women use when they're about to say something vicious disguised as concern. I have to say, Victor seems distracted tonight. Everything all right? My smile didn't waver. He's been working on the Singapore merger. You know how he gets. Patricia's eyes gleamed. Well, a man who works that hard deserves a wife who understands. Translation, she'd heard something. They always heard something before you did. The wives formed their own intelligence network, trading secrets like currency at events like these. Patricia was fishing, trying to confirm whatever rumor had made its way through the grapevine. If you'll excuse me, I said, I should check on the caterers. I didn't wait for her response. The crowd parted as I moved through it, a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns that smelled like expensive perfume and older money. People nodded, smiled, called my name. I responded on autopilot, my brain operating on a completely different frequency. 6 weeks ago, I'd found the first message. Victor had left his phone on the bathroom counter, careless, unlike him. A text had lit up the screen while I was brushing my teeth. Just 3 words. Missing you already. No name, no context. But something about those words, the intimacy of them, made my chest tighten. I'd picked up the phone. Locked. I'd tried his birthday. Our anniversary. Nothing. Then, on impulse, I'd tried the month and year he founded his company. It opened. The conversation had been deleted, but that one message sat there like a smoking gun. I'd stood in our marble bathroom, toothpaste foam still at the corner of my mouth, staring at those 3 words until they blurred. I didn't confront him. That was the thing about being married to Victor Hale. You learned to think strategically. Confrontation without evidence was just noise. Victor could explain away anything if you gave him the opportunity. So I'd started watching instead. Late nights at the office became later. Business trips multiplied. He stopped reaching for me in bed, stopped asking about my day, stopped seeing me at all except when we had to appear together. Like tonight. 2 weeks ago, I'd hired someone. Marcus Chen, a former FBI analyst turned private investigator, came recommended by my divorce attorney friend Rachel. If there's something to find, Rachel had said, Marcus will find it. Marcus had delivered his preliminary report 3 days ago. Dinner receipts from restaurants Victor told me he'd skipped. Hotel charges in cities where he claimed to have stayed with colleagues. And photos, grainy but unmistakable, of Victor entering a brownstone in Lincoln Park at 11 p.m. and not leaving until morning. The woman was young, 28, according to Marcus. Sloane Carter, junior associate at Whitman and Cross, the law firm handling Victor's merger. Blonde, ambitious, exactly the type Victor used to joke about before we got married. Trophy hunters, he'd called them. Women who see a man as a ladder to climb. The irony wasn't lost on me. But Marcus's report wasn't enough. I needed something undeniable, something Victor couldn't spin or dismiss. I needed witnesses. I needed him caught in a moment so damning that not even his silver tongue could talk his way out. Tonight, I'd get it. I moved through the ballroom, nodding at faces I barely registered. The orchestra played something classical and forgettable. Waiters circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres, foie gras, caviar, tiny sculptures of food that looked better than they tasted. Victor had spared no expense. He never did when his reputation was on display. I spotted him across the room, holding court with a circle of men in identical Tom Ford suits. Senator Michaels, Judge Brennan, the CEO of some tech startup Victor was considering acquiring. Victor's laugh carried over the music, that practiced sound of masculine confidence. His hand gestured expansively as he told some story, probably about closing an impossible deal or outmaneuvering a competitor. He didn't look at me once. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out, turning away from the crowd. Marcus. She arrived 10 minutes ago. Took the service elevator to the 12th floor. My pulse kicked up. The 12th floor. Private suites, reserved for VIPs and special guests. Victor had told me he'd booked the presidential suite on the 15th for potential investors who might need somewhere to freshen up during the evening. He'd lied. Of course he'd lied. I texted back. Which room? The reply came immediately. 1247. End of the East Corridor. Do you want me to come up? I considered it. Marcus was downstairs in the lobby, blending in with hotel guests. But this needed to be me. This needed to be personal. Me. Stay where you are. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, call Rachel. Marcus. Be careful. Careful. I almost laughed. Careful had gotten me 8 years of marriage to a man who'd stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as furniture. Something expensive and decorative that made his house look good. I slipped my phone back into my clutch and started moving toward the ballroom's east exit. The crowd had thickened as more guests arrived, which worked in my favor. No one paid attention to a woman walking purposefully toward the restrooms. Mara! Victor's voice stopped me cold. I turned, forcing my expression into neutral pleasantness. He approached with that smile he wore for cameras, all teeth and no warmth. His tuxedo fit perfectly because he had them custom-made in Milan. Salt and pepper hair swept back, just distinguished enough to suggest wisdom without age. At 46, Victor Hale looked like what he was, a man who'd spent his entire life winning. Where are you going? He touched my elbow, the gesture proprietary, ownership disguised as affection. Ladies' room, I said. Unless you'd like to escort me? His smile tightened. Don't be long. The mayor wants to meet you. I'll be quick. I pulled away before he could respond, walking fast enough to discourage following, but not so fast as to draw attention. The ballroom doors closed behind me, muffling the orchestra into a distant murmur. The hotel corridor stretched ahead, empty except for a housekeeper pushing a cart of clean linens. I walked past her, past the elevators, toward the stairwell at the end of the hall. My heels clicked on marble, each step echoing. In the stairwell, I stopped, pressed my back against the cold concrete wall, and closed my eyes. This was it. The moment that would either confirm everything or prove me wrong. Part of me, a small, desperate part, hoped I was wrong. Hoped that Marcus had made a mistake, that the woman in room 1247 was a colleague, that there was some reasonable explanation for all of it. But I knew better. I'd known for weeks, maybe longer. Maybe I'd known from the first "I love you" that didn't sound quite right. The first time Victor looked through me instead of at me. I pulled out my phone again and opened my contacts, scrolled to Rachel's name. My finger hovered over the call button. Do it, I whispered to myself. Make this real. I pressed call. Rachel answered on the second ring. Mara? What's wrong? I need you to come to the Grandmont, now. Bring whoever you trust most, someone who can witness what I'm about to do. A pause. Then, you found them. Room 1247, 12th floor. I'm 20 minutes away. Can you wait? I looked up at the stairwell, 12 flights of concrete steps leading to whatever waited above. No, I said. But come anyway. I'm going up now. Mara, don't do anything. 20 minutes, Rachel. East corridor, 12th floor. I hung up before she could argue, slipped the phone back into my clutch beside my driver's license, credit cards, and the small digital recorder I'd activated before leaving the ballroom. Everything would be documented. Everything would be witnessed. The stairs were brutal in heels, but I didn't slow down. 1 floor, 2, 3. My calves burned. My breathing came faster, but with each step, something inside me crystallized. The doubt, the fear, the second-guessing, it all hardened into something sharper. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind. The cold, calculating kind that made your hands steady and your vision clear. I'd spent 8 years being the perfect wife. 8 years smiling at his colleagues, hosting his parties, wearing the right dresses and saying the right things. 8 years making myself smaller so he could feel bigger. Tonight, that ended. Floor 7, 8, 9. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. Probably Victor, wondering where I'd gone. Let him wonder. Let him sweat. Floor 10, 11. The stairwell door to the 12th floor was heavier than the others. Pneumatic hinges designed to keep noise from traveling. I pushed through it into a corridor that looked nothing like the public floors below. Here, the carpet was thicker, the lighting softer. Artwork lined the walls, actual paintings, not prints. The air smelled like lavender and money. Room 1247 sat at the end of the hall, exactly where Marcus said it would be. A do not disturb sign hung from the handle. I stood outside, listening. Nothing. The door was thick, designed for privacy, but I knew they were in there. Marcus didn't make mistakes. I pulled out my phone one more time, texted Marcus. I'm outside the room. His reply, don't go in alone. Wait for backup. I stared at the message, considered it for exactly 3 seconds. Then I knocked. The sound echoed in the empty corridor, 3 sharp raps that sounded louder than they were. I waited. 15 seconds. 20. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time. Movement inside. Footsteps. Hurried. A woman's voice, too muffled to make out words. The door opened 6 inches, security chain still attached. Victor's face appeared in the gap, hair disheveled, shirt untucked. His expression cycled through confusion, recognition, and panic in the space of a heartbeat. Mara. His voice came out strangled. What are you... How did you... Open the door, Victor. This isn't what you think. I said open the door. We stared at each other through the gap. I watched him calculate, saw his brain running through options, explanations, strategies. This was what Victor did best. Think fast, talk faster, turn any situation to his advantage. But I'd learned from the best. You have 3 seconds, I said, my voice perfectly calm. Then I start screaming, loud enough that every guest on this floor comes running. Do you really want hotel security involved? His jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought he might actually refuse, might try to call my bluff. Then the door closed. The chain rattled. The door opened fully. Victor stood there in his wrinkled tuxedo shirt and dress pants, barefoot on the suite's plush carpet. Behind him, the room was a mess. Champagne bottle on the coffee table, 2 glasses, clothes draped over furniture. And on the sofa, wrapped in a hotel bathrobe with wet hair plastered to her skull, sat Sloane Carter. She looked younger in person. Terrified, yes, but also calculating. Already working on her story, I could tell. The bathrobe was strategic, implied intimacy without confirming it. She could claim she'd just showered after a workout, that this was all innocent. Mara, Victor started, stepping forward with his hands raised like I was a spooked animal. Let me explain. Don't. The word came out sharp as glass. Don't say a single word yet. I walked into the room, my heels silent on carpet now. Closed the door behind me. The suite was massive. Living area, separate bedroom visible through an open door, bathroom with a rainfall shower I could hear still dripping. Victor had paid for this. Put it on the company card, probably. Wrote it off as a business expense. The rage inside me flared white-hot for just a second before I crushed it back down. Not yet. I needed to stay cold. Ms. Carter, I said, turning to the woman on the couch. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Mara Ellison, Victor's wife. Sloane's face drained of color. Mrs. Hale, this isn't... How long? The question hung in the air. Sloane looked at Victor, then back at me. How? Long? 6 months, Victor said quietly. 6 months. Half a year. While I'd been planning our summer vacation to the Amalfi Coast, while I'd been hosting his mother for Thanksgiving, while I'd been standing beside him at charity galas, smiling for cameras. Mara, please. Victor moved closer. I stepped back. It's not what you think. Sloane and I, we're not... It's complicated. Complicated. I tasted the word. That's an interesting choice. My phone buzzed. Rachel, probably almost here. I needed to stall, needed to keep them in this room until witnesses arrived. Otherwise, this became he said, she said, and Victor had more practice lying than I did. Sit down, I said. Both of you. Mara, sit. Down. Something in my voice made them obey. Victor sank into an armchair. Sloane stayed on the couch, pulling the bathrobe tighter. I walked to the window, looked out at Chicago's skyline stretching toward the lake. Lights everywhere, millions of them. Each one a life, a story, a person dealing with their own betrayals and heartbreaks. Do you know what's funny? I said, not turning around. I almost convinced myself I was being paranoid, that I was imagining things, that a good wife wouldn't go through her husband's phone, wouldn't hire an investigator, wouldn't doubt the man she married. You hired someone? Victor's voice cracked with anger now. You had me followed? I spun to face him. Don't you dare act like I'm the one who broke our marriage. I wasn't followed, he said. I would have noticed. Marcus Chen, former FBI. He's been documenting your affair for 3 weeks. Dinner receipts, hotel charges, photographs. I have all of it, Victor. Every text you thought you deleted, every late-night meeting, the brownstone in Lincoln Park, the weekend in Milwaukee you said was a conference. Victor's face went gray. And before you try to deny it, I continued, pulling my phone out, I should mention that I've been recording this entire conversation. Both of them froze. That's illegal, Sloane said quickly. Illinois is a 2-party consent state. Actually, I said, hotels are considered quasi-public spaces, and I have every right to record my own conversations. But thank you for confirming that you're familiar with state law. I'm sure that will be helpful when my divorce attorney takes your deposition. Sloane's mouth snapped shut. Victor stood up slowly. Mara, let's talk about this rationally. You're upset, I understand. Don't patronize me. I'm not. I'm trying to have a conversation. You lost the right to conversations when you started fucking a woman young enough to be your daughter. The words landed like a slap. Victor flinched. Sloane looked like she might cry. A knock at the door made all 3 of us jump. That'll be my attorney, I said calmly, and a witness. Are we going to have this conversation like adults, or do I need to make this very public? Victor stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe the woman standing here, cold, furious, in control, was someone new. Someone who'd been buried under years of being Mrs. Victor Hale. Another knock, more insistent. Your choice, I said. But choose fast. Victor's shoulders sagged. Let them in. I opened the door. Rachel stood there in jeans and a blazer, clearly having rushed from wherever she'd been. Next to her, a woman I didn't recognize held a small video camera. This is Jennifer Moss, Rachel said, stepping inside. Notary public and legal videographer. Whatever happens in this room is now on record. Jennifer nodded at me, then started setting up her equipment without a word. Professional. Efficient. What the hell is this? Victor demanded, finding his voice again. You can't just... Actually, Rachel said, pulling a document from her bag, she can. And you're going to sit down and answer some questions. Or you can refuse, and we'll see you in court where the discovery process will be much more thorough. Victor looked at me. Really looked at me, for the first time in months. I saw the moment he realized he'd miscalculated. That I wasn't going to cry or beg or make a scene, that I'd come prepared. Mara, he said quietly, please, let's not do this here. Where then? In our home? In your office? Where exactly is the right place to confront your husband about his affair? He had no answer. The next hour played out like a deposition. Rachel asked questions. Jennifer's camera recorded everything. Victor tried to minimize, to explain, to justify. Sloane mostly stayed silent except when directly questioned, her earlier calculation replaced by genuine fear as she realized her career at Whitman and Cross was probably over. I learned details I didn't want to know. They'd met at a firm happy hour, started with drinks after work, progressed to dinners. The first time they slept together was in this very hotel during last year's gala while I'd been downstairs talking to the mayor. I learned that Victor had promised Sloane he'd leave me, that he'd told her our marriage was already over, that we were only staying together for appearances, that I was cold, distant, more interested in my charity work than in him. I learned that he'd bought her jewelry, taken her to restaurants we'd talked about trying together, told her he loved her. I sat through it all with a face like stone, taking notes on my phone. Every admission, every detail, every lie he'd told either of us. When Rachel finally ran out of questions, silence filled the room. Jennifer's camera light blinked red, still recording. "I think we're done here," Rachel said, looking at me, "unless you have anything to add." I stood up, walked over to where Victor sat slumped in his chair, looking 10 years older than he had 3 hours ago. "I want you out of the house," I said. "Tonight. Pack a bag. Stay at your club or a hotel or her place, I don't care. But you don't sleep under our roof again." "Mara, I've already retained Rachel. She'll be filing for divorce on Monday. You'll be served papers at your office. And I'm taking everything, Victor. The house, the vacation property in Aspen, the art collection you've been building, every asset we acquired during our marriage." "You can't—" "Actually," Rachel interjected, "she can. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, and given the circumstances, documented infidelity, misuse of marital assets, Mara has a very strong case." Victor's face flushed red. "You vindictive—" "Choose your next words very carefully," I said softly. "Because they're all being recorded." He shut his mouth. I turned to Sloane, who looked like she wanted to melt into the couch. "As for you," I said, "I have no interest in destroying your career. That would require me to care about you, and I don't. But know this. If Victor made promises to you, he's lying, just like he lied to me, just like he'll lie to whoever comes after you. He doesn't love you. He loves himself. Everything else is negotiable." Sloane's eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, just emptiness where something used to be. I looked at Rachel. "Can we go? We're done here." Jennifer packed up her equipment. Rachel gathered her papers. I walked toward the door without looking back. "Mara, wait." Victor's voice stopped me at the threshold. 8 years. That has to mean something. I turned, looked at the man I'd married in a ceremony with 300 guests and a live orchestra. The man who'd promised to love and cherish me until death parted us. "It did," I said. "It meant everything. But you traded it for 6 months with a girl who thought you'd leave me. So no, Victor. It doesn't mean anything anymore." I walked out. Rachel and Jennifer followed, leaving Victor and his mistress alone in a hotel room that suddenly felt very small. In the corridor, my legs went weak. Rachel caught my elbow. "You okay?" "No," I said, "but I will be." We walked to the elevators, rode down in silence. In the lobby, guests were starting to leave the gala, men in tuxedos helping women into coats. The party was ending. My phone buzzed. "Marcus. Everything okay?" I texted back, "It's done. Thank you." Outside, Chicago's winter hit me like a wall. Rachel's car was parked at the valet stand. "Where do you want to go?" she asked. I thought about the house in Lincoln Park with its perfect furniture and perfect art and perfectly empty rooms. The house that smelled like Victor's cologne and his mother's disapproval and 8 years of slowly disappearing. "A hotel," I said. "Somewhere quiet." Rachel nodded, didn't ask any more questions. As we drove through streets slick with ice, I watched the city slide past my window. Somewhere behind us, Victor was probably still in that room, trying to explain to Sloane why his wife had just dismantled his life with ruthless efficiency. Or maybe he was already spinning the story for damage control, figuring out how to manage the scandal. I didn't care anymore. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something besides numbness. Not happiness, not satisfaction. Just a cold, clear certainty that I'd done exactly what needed to be done. The woman who'd walked into the Grandmont Hotel tonight playing the role of perfect wife was gone. Whatever came next, whoever I became now, would be built on truth instead of illusions. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "This is Patricia Drummond. I don't know what happened tonight, but I saw you leave. Are you all right?" I almost laughed. The gossip network already churning. By tomorrow, every wife in Victor's social circle would know something happened. By Monday, they'd know everything. Let them talk. Let them all talk. I deleted the message and turned off my phone. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, paperwork, division of assets. Tomorrow would bring Victor's attempts to control the narrative, to paint me as vindictive or unstable or whatever story served him best. But tonight was mine. I'd walk through fire and come out the other side. Not unscathed, fire always leaves scars. But alive, awake, myself again. Rachel pulled up to the Peninsula Hotel. A doorman opened my door. "Do you want me to come up?" Rachel asked. "No, I need to be alone. Call me if you need anything, anytime." I squeezed her hand. "Thank you for everything." She drove away, leaving me standing under the hotel awning while snow started to fall. Fat, wet flakes that would turn to slush by morning. I walked inside, booked a suite I couldn't quite afford yet, and rode the elevator to the 14th floor. The room was generic but clean, the kind of space designed to be forgettable. I kicked off my heels, peeled off the emerald dress, and stood in the bathroom in just my slip. In the mirror, I looked the same. Same dark hair, same hazel eyes, same face that had smiled for cameras all night. But something behind the eyes had changed, hardened. I'd spent 8 years being someone else, someone small and quiet and convenient, someone who didn't make waves or ask hard questions or demand more than she was given. That woman was gone. I didn't know yet who would take her place, but for the first time in a very long time, I wanted to find out. I woke up at 4 a.m. to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The unfamiliar ceiling, the industrial hum of a hotel air conditioning unit, sheets that smelled like generic lavender detergent instead of the French linen spray our housekeeper used. Then it all came back. The hotel room. Victor's face when I opened that door. Sloane wrapped in a bathrobe, looking like a child caught stealing. I reached for my phone. 17 missed calls. 12 voicemails. 43 text messages. Victor's name dominated the list. I didn't read them. Instead, I called Rachel. She answered on the first ring, voice alert despite the hour. "Mara, what's wrong?" "Nothing. I need you to do something for me." "It's 4 in the morning. I know. I need you to file the papers today. Not Monday. Today." A pause. "Mara, it's Saturday. The courthouse is closed. Then file them first thing Monday morning. And I need you to freeze all our joint accounts. Credit cards, checking, savings, everything, before he has a chance to move money around." I heard Rachel moving, probably getting out of bed. "That's aggressive. Are you sure?" "He's already thinking about it. Right now, Victor's in damage control mode. By tomorrow, he'll have talked to his own lawyers. They'll tell him to secure his assets. I need to move faster." "Okay, I'll need you to come to my office this morning. We'll need to sign some paperwork, make this official." "What time?" 9? "I'll be there at 8. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. Sleep wasn't coming back. I got up, turned on the coffee maker that sat on the kitchenette counter, and finally looked at Victor's messages. The first few were predictable. "We need to talk. You're overreacting. This isn't what you think." Then they got desperate. "Mara, please, I made a mistake. We can fix this." And finally, around 2 a.m., they turned angry. "You had no right to humiliate me like that. To bring lawyers and cameras. Who the hell do you think you are?" I screenshot that last one. Sent it to Rachel with a note. Exhibit A. His true colors. The coffee finished brewing. I poured a cup and stood at the window, watching Chicago wake up. Streetlights still glowed orange against the pre-dawn dark. A garbage truck rumbled past. Someone walked a dog, both of them hunched against the cold. Normal life. Going on like nothing had changed. My phone rang again. Not Victor this time. My mother. I considered not answering, but Mom had a sixth sense for crisis. If I didn't pick up, she'd keep calling until I did. "Hi, Mom." Mara Elizabeth Ellison. Her voice cut through the phone like a knife. What on earth is going on? Patricia Drummond called me at 3 in the morning saying there was some incident at the gala. Something about you and Victor in a hotel room? Of course, Patricia called her. The gossip network worked faster than I'd thought. Victor's having an affair. I caught him last night. I'm filing for divorce. Silence. Then, you caught him how? I followed him to a hotel room where he was with another woman. I had my lawyer present. It's all documented. You followed him? Mom's voice climbed an octave. Mara, that's not how these things are handled. How should I have handled it? Asked nicely if he was cheating? You should have called me first, or your father. We could have helped you think this through rationally instead of making a scene. I laughed, the sound bitter even to my own ears. A scene? I documented evidence of adultery. That's not a scene, that's strategy. It's vindictive. It's smart. Mom made a noise of frustration. Your father is going to be devastated. Victor is his golfing partner. They have business connections. Then maybe Dad should have chosen a golfing partner who doesn't cheat on his daughter. Don't be dramatic. Men make mistakes. It doesn't mean you throw away 8 years of marriage. I closed my eyes, counted to 5. My mother had stayed married to my father through 3 affairs that I knew about, probably more that I didn't. She'd swallowed her pride, kept the family together, maintained appearances. It was what women of her generation did. I'm not you, Mom. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not staying with someone who treats me like furniture. It means I'm worth more than being someone's backup plan while he screws his way through his staff. Mara, I have to go. I'll call you later. I hung up before she could argue, turned off my phone completely this time. The coffee had gone cold. I dumped it and took a shower instead, standing under water hot enough to turn my skin pink. When I finally got out, it was 6 a.m. Still too early for Rachel's office, but I couldn't stay in this hotel room anymore. I got dressed in the same clothes from last night. The emerald dress seemed obscene in daylight, so I pulled on the complimentary bathrobe over it and went down to the lobby. The concierge, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, looked up as I approached. Good morning, Mrs. Hale. How can I help you? I flinched at the name. I need to buy some clothes. Where's the nearest store that's open this early? Most shops don't open until 10 on Saturdays, but there's a Target about 6 blocks north that opens at 7. Target. When was the last time I'd been in a Target? Victor preferred boutiques, personal shoppers, places where they knew your name and your measurements, and brought champagne while you tried things on. Perfect. Thank you. I walked out into the morning cold wearing a hotel bathrobe over a designer dress and last night's heels, and I didn't care who saw me. Let them stare. Let them whisper. I'd spent 8 years caring what people thought. Target was mostly empty when I arrived. A few early morning shoppers, employees restocking shelves. I grabbed a cart and started throwing things in. Jeans, t-shirts, a winter coat, underwear, sneakers. Nothing matched. Nothing was coordinated. I just grabbed what looked comfortable. At the checkout, a teenager with blue hair and multiple piercings rang me up without comment until she got to the bathrobe. Do you want to keep wearing that? Or... I looked down. The Peninsula Hotel logo was embroidered on the chest. I'll keep it, I said. Charge me for it. She shrugged and scanned the barcode inside the collar. Back at the hotel, I changed into jeans and a sweater that was 2 sizes too big. Put on the sneakers. Looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. No makeup. Hair pulled into a messy ponytail. Clothes that cost $30 total instead of $3,000. I looked more like myself than I had in years. Rachel's office was in a high-rise downtown, all glass and steel and expensive views. I arrived at 7:45, but she was already there, sitting at her desk with coffee and a stack of legal pads covered in notes. You look different, she said when I walked in. I went to Target. She smiled. How are you holding up? I don't know yet. Ask me when this is over. We spent the next 3 hours going through everything. Asset lists, account numbers, property deeds. Rachel's paralegal, a sharp woman named Amy, brought in files from storage, the prenup Victor and I had signed before getting married. This is fairly standard, Rachel said, flipping through it. Division of assets acquired during the marriage, spousal support calculations based on income disparity. But there's a clause here about infidelity. She pointed to a paragraph halfway down page 6. I read it twice, hardly believing what I was seeing. If either party is proven to have engaged in extramarital affairs, They forfeit their claim to 50% of all marital assets acquired during the marriage. Victor insisted on it, I said slowly, remembering. Said it protected both of us, that it ensured we'd both stay faithful. Rachel's smile was sharp as broken glass. Well, that backfired spectacularly. Can we enforce it? With the documentation from last night, the video testimony, the recorded confession, Marcus's investigation? Absolutely. Victor signed this. His signature is right here, witnessed and notarized. I stared at the prenup, at Victor's confident scrawl next to mine. He'd been so sure, so certain that he'd never be the one caught cheating. What does this mean exactly? Amy pulled out a calculator. Based on the asset list you provided, your marital estate is worth approximately $47 million. Properties, investments, art, vehicles, everything. Under the prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause, Victor would forfeit his claim to half of that, $23.5 million. The number felt surreal. I'd known Victor was wealthy, but seeing it written down, calculating it like this, made it concrete in a way it had never been before. Combined with standard equitable distribution of the remaining assets, Rachel continued, you're looking at walking away with roughly $35 million, plus the properties in your name and whatever the court awards in spousal support. He'll fight this. Of course he will. But Mara, we have him dead to rights. Video confession, documented affair, violation of a prenup he himself insisted on. Most lawyers would tell him to settle. Victor doesn't settle. Rachel leaned back in her chair. Then we go to war. But I need to know you're ready for that, because this is going to get ugly. Victor will attack your character, dig up anything he can use against you. He'll make this as painful as possible. I thought about the 17 missed calls, the messages that went from pleading to angry, the way Victor's face had looked when I walked out of that hotel room, humiliated, furious, calculating his next move. I'm ready, I said. What do we do first? First, we freeze the accounts. I've already prepared the paperwork. You'll need to sign here, here, and here. She pushed documents across the desk. This prevents either of you from transferring, selling, or concealing any marital assets while the divorce is pending. I signed without hesitation. Second, we serve him. I recommend doing it at his office Monday morning. Public enough to be embarrassing, private enough to avoid a complete spectacle. Do it. Third, and this is important, you need to prepare for the media. Victor has connections. He'll try to control the narrative, paint you as vindictive or unstable. You need to get ahead of that. How? Rachel pulled out another file. I have a friend at the Tribune, investigative journalist, very thorough. If you give her your story, the documented affair, the prenup violation, everything, she can write a piece that frames this accurately, before Victor has a chance to spin it. The idea of my personal life in the newspaper made my stomach turn. But Rachel was right. This wasn't going to stay private. Better to control how the story got out than let Victor write the version that served him. Set up the meeting, I said. But I want approval before anything goes to print. Done. We worked until noon, going through every detail, every contingency. By the time I left Rachel's office, my hand cramped from signing documents and my head throbbed from information overload. I was halfway to the elevator when my phone rang. I'd turned it back on to coordinate with Rachel. Now I regretted it. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mara Hale? A woman's voice, young but professional. Who is this? My name is Sophie Chen. I'm a reporter with the Chicago Tribune. I was wondering if you had any comment on the allegations regarding your husband's business practices. I stopped walking. What allegations? I'm working on a story about Hale Industries. Multiple sources claim Victor has been engaging in fraudulent accounting practices, possibly embezzling funds from company accounts. I heard you might be filing for divorce and thought you might want to comment. The elevator arrived. I didn't get on. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because my sources say you've hired Rachel Morrison, one of the best divorce attorneys in Chicago, and that there was an incident at the Grandmont Hotel last night involving you, your husband, and a young woman from Whitman and Cross. My heart pounded. Who are your sources? I can't reveal that, but if you're planning to divorce Victor, you should know what you're potentially dealing with. The story I'm working on involves multiple violations of securities law, falsified financial statements, and misappropriation of company funds totaling somewhere around $15 million. I leaned against the wall trying to process this. Embezzlement? Victor? I need to go, I said. Wait, if you want to talk off the record, I can help you understand. I hung up, stared at my phone like it might explode. Embezzlement, fraud, $15 million. If this was true, it changed everything. This wasn't just about a divorce anymore. This was criminal. I called Rachel back. Sophie Chen from the Tribune just called me, said she's investigating Victor for embezzlement and fraud. Silence. Then, did you talk to her? I hung up. But Rachel, if this is true, don't say anything else over the phone. Come back to my office, now. I rode the elevator back up, my mind racing. Victor had always been careful with money, meticulous even. He'd built Hale Industries from nothing, turned it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise through careful investments and strategic acquisitions. Or so I'd thought. Back in Rachel's office, she'd pulled up something on her computer. Sophie Chen is legitimate, award-winning journalist, specializes in white-collar crime. If she's working on a story about Victor, it means she has sources, real ones. What do I do? Nothing yet. Let me make some calls, but Mara, if Victor is being investigated for fraud, you need to distance yourself from his business affairs immediately. Any hint that you knew about illegal activities could implicate you. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know anything. I believe you. But perception matters, especially if this goes public. She picked up her phone, started dialing. I sat in the chair across from her desk, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. An affair was one thing, embarrassing, painful, but ultimately survivable. Criminal fraud was something else entirely. Rachel spoke in low tones to someone on the phone, taking notes. When she hung up, her expression was grim. I talked to a contact at the SEC. There's been an investigation into Hale Industries for the past 4 months. They've been looking at discrepancies in quarterly reports, unusual fund transfers. Nothing's been filed yet, but it's serious enough that they've assigned a full team. 4 months, I said quietly. The same time Victor's affair started. Rachel nodded. Probably not a coincidence. If Victor knew he was under investigation, the stress might have contributed to poor decision-making. You mean he started screwing his associate because he was stressed about potentially going to prison? I'm saying people don't make their best choices when they're under that kind of pressure. My phone rang again. Victor this time. I showed Rachel the screen. Don't answer it, she said. In fact, block his number. All communication needs to go through me from now on. I blocked him. Felt a small, petty satisfaction watching his name disappear from my recent calls. But the satisfaction didn't last, because if Victor was being investigated for fraud, that meant our money, my money, supposedly, might not actually exist. It might all be an illusion built on falsified reports and creative accounting. Rachel, I said slowly, if Victor embezzled $15 million from his own company, where did it go? She met my eyes. That's what we need to find out. The next 72 hours were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and revelations that kept getting worse. Rachel's investigator, a different one than Marcus, someone who specialized in financial crimes, started pulling Victor's records. Bank statements, wire transfers, credit card receipts. What he found painted a picture of a man living far beyond even his considerable means. The brownstone in Lincoln Park that Marcus had photographed Victor entering? Victor had bought it. 6 months ago, cash purchase for $2.3 million. Deed was in Sloan Carter's name, but the money came from an offshore account traced back to Hale Industries. The business trips to Miami, Los Angeles, London, most of them never happened. The conferences Victor claimed to attend didn't exist. The receipts were fabricated. The Singapore merger he'd been working on for the past year? There was no merger. The entire deal was fictional, created to justify transferring funds between accounts. He's been running a shell game, Rachel's investigator explained Monday afternoon. Moving money between legitimate accounts and fake ones, creating the illusion of business activity to hide the fact that he's been siphoning funds for years. The affair probably isn't even the worst of it. This goes back at least 5 years, maybe longer. I sat in Rachel's conference room, surrounded by spreadsheets and bank statements and evidence of a life I'd never actually been living. Every anniversary dinner, every vacation, every piece of jewelry Victor had given me, bought with stolen money. How much? I asked. Total. How much did he take? The investigator checked his notes. Based on what we found so far? Close to $32 million over 6 years. The number didn't even feel real. It was too big, too abstract. Like hearing about a natural disaster in a foreign country. Terrible, but so far removed from your own life that you couldn't quite process it. Except this was my life. My marriage. My husband. Rachel's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her expression tightened. The Tribune just published their story. She turned her laptop toward me. The headline was brutal. Hale Industries CEO under investigation for fraud, embezzlement. Below it, a photo of Victor at last year's gala, smiling at the camera with a champagne glass in hand. He looked powerful, successful, completely in control. The article was thorough. Sophie Chen had done her homework. She'd interviewed former employees, analyzed public financial statements, talked to sources at the SEC. She'd documented the fake conferences, the shell companies, the offshore accounts. And at the bottom, a single paragraph that made my blood run cold. Victor Hale's wife, Mara Ellison Hale, filed for divorce on Monday morning, citing irreconcilable differences. Sources close to the couple say Mrs. Hale was unaware of her husband's alleged criminal activities. The timing of the divorce filing, just days before this investigation became public, raises questions about what she may have known and when. They're implying I was involved, I said, my voice hollow. They're being careful not to accuse you directly, Rachel said. But yes, they're raising the question. My phone started ringing, then buzzing with texts. Reporters, probably, people I hadn't talked to in years, suddenly very interested in my story. I turned it off again. What happens now? Now we prepare for the worst, Rachel said. The SEC will want to interview you. Victor's lawyers will claim you're trying to distance yourself from his crimes by filing for divorce. The media will dig into everything, your finances, your friends, your family. This is going to get worse before it gets better. I thought about my mother's call, Patricia Drummond's messages, the way people had looked at me at the gala, admiring, envious, seeing me as an extension of Victor's success. None of it had been real. The money, the status, the perfect life. All of it built on lies and stolen funds. I want to cooperate, I said, with the SEC investigation. Whatever they need from me, I'll give it to them. That could expose you to... I don't care. I didn't know about this, but I'm not going to protect him either. If Victor stole $32 million, he should face the consequences. Rachel studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, I'll reach out to the investigators, set up a meeting. She made the call while I sat there, watching the city through the conference room window. Somewhere out there, Victor was probably in his own lawyer's office, planning his defense, figuring out how to minimize the damage, shift the blame. Maybe he'd try to claim I knew all along, that I'd benefited from his crimes just as much as he had. Maybe he was right. I'd lived in the house bought with embezzled money, worn jewelry purchased with stolen funds, traveled to places paid for with fraud. But I hadn't known. I'd trusted him. Believed him when he said business was good, when he explained away the long hours and frequent trips. I'd been so focused on suspecting him of an affair that I'd never thought to question where the money came from. Rachel hung up. They'll meet with you tomorrow, 10 a.m., Federal Building downtown. You'll need to bring any financial records you have, bank statements, tax returns, anything with both your names on it. Okay. Mara. She waited until I looked at her. This is serious. If they think you're hiding something, they'll come after you too. You need to be completely honest, even if it's embarrassing or makes you look bad. I will. And you need to prepare for the possibility that everything you thought you had is gone. The house, the cars, the accounts, all of it might be seized as proceeds of crime. I'd already lost my marriage, my husband, my reputation. What was money compared to that? Then I'll start over, I said. That night, alone in my hotel room, I finally let myself fall apart. Not dramatically, not with screaming or throwing things. I just sat on the bathroom floor with my back against the tub and cried until my eyes swelled shut and my throat went raw. I cried for the 8 years I'd wasted on a man who'd never really seen me, for the life I'd built that turned out to be made of smoke and mirrors, for the version of myself who'd been so desperate to be loved that she'd accepted breadcrumbs and called it a feast. But mostly, I cried because I was terrified. Terrified of starting over with nothing. Terrified of facing federal investigators and hostile reporters and lawyers who'd paint me as either complicit or stupid. Terrified that maybe I was both. When the tears finally stopped, I got up, washed my face, looked at myself in the mirror. Tomorrow, I'd walk into that federal building and tell the truth. I'd answer every question, provide every document, cooperate with every request. And if it meant losing everything, then I'd lose everything. Because the one thing I wouldn't lose was myself. Not again. The next morning, I met Rachel outside the federal building at 9:45. She'd brought Amy and another lawyer, a man named David, who specialized in white-collar criminal defense. Just in case, Rachel said when she introduced him. We rode the elevator to the 14th floor in silence. The SEC offices were exactly what you'd expect. Government bland, fluorescent lights, motivational posters about integrity that someone had hung ironically. Agent Sarah Reeves met us in the conference room. Mid-40s, no-nonsense haircut, eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Hale," she said, shaking my hand. "Thank you for coming in voluntarily." "It's Ms. Ellison now," I said. "Or will be, when the divorce is final." Something flickered in her expression. Sympathy, maybe? Or just recognition that I was trying to distance myself from Victor's crimes. We sat down. Agent Reeves had a partner, a younger man who set up a recording device without speaking. "This interview is voluntary," Reeves said. "You're free to leave at any time, and you have the right to have your attorney present, which you do. We're recording this conversation. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good. Let's start with what you knew about your husband's business activities." For the next 4 hours, I answered questions. When did I first suspect something was wrong? 6 weeks ago, but only about the affair, not the fraud. Had I ever reviewed Hale Industries' financial statements? No, Victor handled all business matters. Did I have access to his offshore accounts? I didn't know they existed until 3 days ago. Had I ever signed documents related to shell companies or fraudulent transfers? No. They showed me bank statements with my name on them. I'd signed them years ago when Victor said we needed joint accounts for tax purposes. I'd never actually looked at the transactions. They showed me property deeds. The house in Aspen I thought Victor had bought before we got married? Actually purchased 2 years ago with funds from a fake consulting contract. They showed me wire transfers, receipts, evidence of a financial life I'd never questioned because I'd trusted the man I married. "Did you ever ask where the money came from?" Reeves asked. "Victor owned a successful company. I thought that's where it came from." "You never wondered why a company with $50 million in annual revenue could support a lifestyle that cost close to $8 million a year?" I had no answer for that, because the truth was, I hadn't wondered. I'd been so caught up in playing the role of Victor's wife that I'd never stopped to question the economics of our life. When the interview finally ended, I felt hollowed out. Raw. "We'll need you to provide copies of all joint financial records," Reeves said. "Bank statements, tax returns, credit card bills, everything. I'll get them to you by the end of the week." She studied me for a moment. "Ms. Ellison, I'm going to be frank with you. Right now, we don't have evidence that you were involved in your husband's crimes. But if we find out you're hiding something, that changes. Obstruction of justice is a serious charge." "I'm not hiding anything." "Then you have nothing to worry about." But I did worry. Because even if I was innocent, perception mattered. And right now, to the outside world, I looked like a woman scrambling to save herself while her husband went down. Outside the federal building, reporters had gathered. Someone must have tipped them off. Cameras turned toward us as we pushed through the doors. "Miss Ellison, did you know about the embezzlement? Are you cooperating with investigators? Did you file for divorce to avoid criminal charges?" Rachel and David flanked me, creating a barrier. We walked fast, not answering, heading toward Rachel's car parked half a block away. A reporter stepped directly into my path. Sophie Chen from the Tribune. "Ms. Ellison, just one question. Do you feel any responsibility for not catching your husband's fraud sooner?" I stopped. Rachel grabbed my arm. "Don't," she murmured. "Keep walking." But something in Sophie's question struck a nerve. The implication that I should have known, that I should have been paying attention. "I trusted my husband," I said, my voice carrying over the noise of the crowd. "That was my mistake, but trust isn't a crime." Sophie's eyes gleamed. She'd gotten her quote. Rachel pulled me toward the car. We drove away with cameras still flashing behind us. "That's going to be the headline tomorrow," Rachel said. "You know that, right?" I did. And I didn't care anymore. Let them write their stories. Let them question my intelligence, my awareness, my choices. I'd spent 8 years being who Victor needed me to be. Silent, decorative, conveniently oblivious. That version of me was dead. Whatever came next, criminal investigations, media scrutiny, financial ruin, I'd face it as myself. Flawed, furious, and finally free. The headline hit the next morning exactly as Rachel predicted. Trust isn't a crime. Hale's wife claims ignorance in fraud case. Below it, a photo someone had snapped outside the federal building. Me in my Target jeans and oversized sweater, looking small and overwhelmed between Rachel and David. Not the polished society wife in designer gowns. Just a woman who'd walked into a nightmare and couldn't find the exit. I was reading it on my phone in the hotel restaurant when a shadow fell across my table. "Rough week?" I looked up. Marcus Chen stood there holding a coffee cup, his expression carefully neutral. "That's one way to put it," I said. "How did you find me?" "I'm a private investigator. It's literally my job." He gestured to the empty chair. "May I?" I nodded. He sat down, studying me with the same intensity he probably used when following cheating husbands through hotel lobbies. "I saw the Tribune article," he said. "The one about the embezzlement. Everyone saw it. I'm guessing you didn't know about the financial stuff when you hired me. I hired you to follow my husband to prove he was having an affair, which you did. The fraud was a bonus surprise." Marcus took a sip of his coffee. "Here's the thing. I've been doing this work for 12 years. I've seen a lot of bad marriages, a lot of people hiding things from each other, and I've gotten pretty good at reading situations." "What's your point?" "My point is, in all the surveillance I did on Victor, following him, documenting his movements, tracking his patterns, I noticed something. He wasn't just meeting Sloane Carter. He was meeting other people too. Men in expensive suits, always in parking garages or empty restaurants, always looking over their shoulders." I set down my phone. "Why didn't you mention this in your report?" "Because you paid me to document an affair, not investigate potential crimes. But now that the crimes are public knowledge," he pulled a thumb drive from his pocket and set it on the table between us. "I thought you might want to see what else I found." I stared at the small device like it might explode. "What's on it?" "Photos, video, audio recordings from when Victor met with these people. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough. Names, account numbers, references to money transfers. I think some of these men were helping Victor move money around, maybe even helping him hide it." My hand trembled as I reached for the drive. "Have you given this to the SEC?" "Not yet. I wanted to give you first look. You paid me to find the truth. This is part of it." "Marcus, if what's on here is evidence of crimes and you withhold it, I'm not withholding it. I'm giving it to you. What you do with it is your choice." "But Mara?" He leaned forward. "If Victor has people helping him, they're not going to be happy about an investigation. Men who help hide $32 million aren't the kind who accept consequences quietly." A chill ran through me. "Are you saying I'm in danger?" "I'm saying be careful. And maybe don't stay in places where anyone with a credit card can find your room number." He stood up, left his coffee cup on the table, and walked away before I could respond. I sat there staring at the thumb drive, my appetite completely gone. 20 minutes later, I was back in Rachel's office with the drive plugged into her computer. Rachel, David, and Amy crowded around the screen as we went through Marcus's files. The photos showed exactly what Marcus had described. Victor meeting with men I didn't recognize in locations clearly chosen for privacy. Parking structures. Empty office buildings after hours. A boat dock at night. The video was grainier but unmistakable. Victor handing over envelopes, accepting packages, checking his phone nervously while talking to someone whose face the camera never quite caught. And the audio, captured from a distance with equipment that turned voices into barely intelligible murmurs, still contained fragments that made my blood run cold. "Account in the Caymans ready. Transfer needs to happen before the audit. She doesn't know anything. I made sure..." That last one was Victor's voice, talking about me, confirming that he deliberately kept me in the dark. This is beyond embezzlement, David said quietly. This is organized. Multiple parties conspiring to commit fraud and evade federal investigation. And if these men find out about this evidence, Rachel added, they're going to come after whoever has it. She looked at me. I understood what she wasn't saying out loud. They'd come after me. We need to give this to the SEC immediately, Amy said. Like, right now. Agreed, Rachel said. She was already picking up her phone. I'm calling Agent Reeves. While she made the call, I watched the video loop on her computer screen. Victor, the man I'd married, meeting with criminals in the dark, planning, scheming, building an empire of lies while I slept beside him every night. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? Rachel hung up. Reeves wants to meet. Today, in 1 hour. Federal building, same conference room. We gathered everything. The thumb drive, Marcus's original report, notes from our review of the files. I felt like I was moving through water, everything slow and distorted. In the car on the way to the federal building, my phone finally rang with a number I recognized. My father. I almost didn't answer, but avoiding him would only make things worse. Hi, Dad. Mara. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. I just got off the phone with Harold Brennan. He says you've been cooperating with federal investigators against your own husband. Harold Brennan, the judge who'd been at the gala. Victor's friend. Of course, Victor had people calling my father, trying to apply pressure. Victor isn't my husband anymore. And yes, I'm cooperating with the investigation. Do you have any idea what you're doing? The damage to this family's reputation? The damage was done when Victor stole $32 million and cheated on me. I'm just telling the truth about it. The truth? My father's laugh was bitter. The truth is, you're making yourself look like either a fool who didn't notice her husband was a criminal or a vindictive woman trying to destroy him out of spite. Neither is a good look, Mara. I don't care how it looks. Well, you should. Because when this is over, when the media circus moves on and the lawyers pack up, you're still going to have to live in this city. You're still going to run into these people at restaurants and charity events, and they're going to remember that you turned on your own family. Victor stopped being my family the moment he decided to betray me. Multiple times, in multiple ways. He made mistakes. He committed crimes, Dad. Federal crimes. And if you can't see the difference, then maybe you're part of the problem. Silence. Then, very quietly, your mother and I did not raise you to be this selfish. The words hit harder than a slap. I'd spent my whole life trying to be what my parents wanted, marrying the right man, living the right life, maintaining the right image. And now, when I finally stood up for myself, I was selfish. Tell Mom I love her, I said. But I'm done apologizing for not being who you wanted me to be. I hung up before he could respond. Rachel glanced at me from the driver's seat. Family? Former family, I said. Agent Reeves looked different when we arrived. More alert, almost excited. She had 2 other agents with her this time, plus someone from the Justice Department. Miss Ellison, she said, shaking my hand. Thank you for bringing this in immediately. We spent the next 3 hours going through everything on Marcus's drive. The agents took notes, asked questions, ran facial recognition software on the men in the photos. 2 of them were identified within the first hour. Thomas Liang, Reeves said, pointing to a photo of Victor meeting with an Asian man in his 60s. Investment banker, previously investigated for money laundering but never charged. And this one is Robert Kellerman, owns a firm that specializes in offshore accounts. So Victor had help, David said. Professional help, Reeves confirmed. This isn't a guy embezzling money on impulse. This is a coordinated operation involving multiple parties with expertise in hiding assets. She turned to me. Miss Ellison, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Has anyone contacted you in the past few days? Anyone asking questions about what you know or what you've told us? No. Why? Because if these men find out you're cooperating with our investigation, you become a liability. A witness who can place Victor in meetings with known criminals. That makes you valuable to us and dangerous to them. The words Marcus had said in the hotel restaurant echoed in my head. Be careful. What are you saying? Reeves exchanged a look with her colleagues. I'm saying we'd like to offer you protective custody, just until we can make arrests. You think they'd actually hurt me? I think men who help steal $32 million don't leave loose ends. And right now, you're a loose end. Rachel put a hand on my arm. Mara, you should consider this. But the idea of hiding, of letting these men control my life any more than they already had, made something fierce and stubborn rise up in my chest. No, I said, I'm not hiding. Ms. Ellison, I'll be careful. I'll stay alert. But I'm not going to live in fear because Victor made bad choices and worse friends. Reeves didn't look happy, but she nodded. Then at least let us put someone on you. Plainclothes officer, just keeping an eye out. I wanted to refuse that too, but Rachel's expression made it clear I'd already used up my allowance for stubborn decisions today. Fine, I said. But they stay invisible. I'm not walking around with a bodyguard making a scene. Deal. We left the federal building through a back exit this time, avoiding the reporters who'd camped out front. Rachel drove me back to the peninsula, both of us scanning the streets for anyone following. You're sure about not taking protective custody? She asked as we pulled up to the hotel. I'm sure about not letting these people take anything else from me. They've already taken my marriage, my money, my reputation. I'm not giving them my freedom too. Brave or stupid, I honestly can't tell which. Maybe both. I got out of the car. The doorman nodded at me, familiar now after almost a week of coming and going. Inside, the lobby was quiet. Late afternoon, the lull between checkout and dinner reservations. I rode the elevator to the 14th floor, walked down the empty hallway to my room, put my keycard in the lock. The door was already unlocked. I froze, pulled my hand back. My heart hammered against my ribs. Maybe housekeeping had been in. Maybe I'd forgotten to lock it when I left this morning in my rush to meet Marcus. Or maybe someone was inside. I pulled out my phone, ready to call hotel security, but before I could dial, the door opened from the inside. Victor stood there. He looked terrible. His hair was uncombed, his eyes bloodshot, his suit rumpled like he'd slept in it. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the threshold. How did you get in here? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. I have my ways. He stepped back, gesturing for me to enter my own room. We need to talk. No, we don't. And you need to leave before I call security. Mara, please, 5 minutes. Something in his voice, not anger, not manipulation, just exhaustion, made me hesitate. Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I walked into the room. But I left the door open. Victor moved to the window, his back to me. You gave them the surveillance footage. It wasn't a question. He knew. Yes. Do you have any idea what you've done? I told the truth, that's all. He turned, and the look on his face was something I'd never seen before. Fear. Real, genuine fear. The truth is going to get you killed, Mara. Is that a threat? It's a warning. The men I was working with, they're not going to just accept getting arrested. They're going to come after anyone who can testify against them. And thanks to your private investigator, you can now place me with them. You can connect all of us together. Then maybe you shouldn't have committed crimes with dangerous people. You think this is a joke? His voice rose, cracking. You think this is about our marriage or your hurt feelings? There are people who will kill to protect what we built, and you just painted a target on your back. I stepped closer, keeping the door in my peripheral vision in case I needed to run. What we built? Victor, I didn't build anything. You built a fraud operation and let me believe it was a legitimate business. You used me as cover, as the perfect wife who made you look respectable while you stole money and lied to everyone. I protected you. I kept you separate from all of it so you couldn't be implicated. You kept me separate because I was useful that way. The innocent wife who didn't ask questions. But the second things got messy, you were ready to throw me under the bus. I heard the audio, Victor. She doesn't know anything. I made sure. You were planning to blame me if you got caught. His face went pale. That's not... I was trying to protect you. By making sure everyone knew how stupid I was, how oblivious. By making sure you couldn't be charged as an accomplice. We stared at each other. Outside in the hallway, a housekeeping cart rolled past. The normal sounds of a hotel functioning while my life fell apart. Why are you really here? I asked quietly. It's not to warn me. You could have done that over the phone. Victor's shoulders sagged. He suddenly looked older than his 46 years, like the past week had aged him a decade. I need you to stop cooperating with the investigation. There it was. The real reason. No, Mara, listen to me. If you stop now, if you refuse to testify, the case against me falls apart. The surveillance footage shows meetings, but it doesn't prove what we discussed. Without your testimony connecting the dots, you think I'm going to lie to federal agents to save you? I'm asking you to remember that we were married for 8 years. That has to count for something. It would have counted for something if you'd remembered it before you started sleeping with Sloane Carter, before you started stealing money, before you decided I was expendable. I never thought you were expendable. Then what was I, Victor? What was I to you besides a prop in your perfect life? He opened his mouth, closed it, and for the first time in our entire marriage, he had no answer. You need to leave, I said. And if you contact me again, I'm calling the police. The police won't protect you from the people I'm involved with. Then I guess I'll have to protect myself. I walked to the door, held it open, waited. Victor moved slowly, like a man walking to his execution, but as he passed me, he stopped. I loved you, he said quietly. Maybe not the way you deserved, but I did love you. No, you didn't. You loved having me. That's not the same thing. He flinched like I'd hit him. Then he walked out into the hallway. I closed the door, locked it, put the deadbolt on, and the security bar. Then I stood there shaking, adrenaline finally catching up with me. My phone rang. Rachel. Mara, where are you? The agent assigned to watch you just reported that Victor entered your hotel. Are you okay? I'm fine. He's gone. What did he want? He wanted me to stop cooperating with the investigation. Silence. Then, please tell me you said no. Of course I said no. Thank everything. Listen, I'm coming over. Don't open the door for anyone but me. Not housekeeping, not room service, nobody. Rachel, you're being paranoid. Victor's business partners are being arrested as we speak. Agent Reeves just called. They're bringing in Thomas Liang and Robert Kellerman right now. Which means, in about 2 hours, those men are going to know that someone provided evidence against them. And they're going to know that someone is you. My mouth went dry. How would they know it's me? Because Victor's going to tell them, either to deflect blame or out of spite, or just because he's desperate. And when they find out, they're going to come looking. I have an officer watching the hotel. One officer against professional criminals with resources and connections. Mara, please, let me come get you. We'll go somewhere safe until the arrests are complete. I looked around the hotel room, my clothes scattered across the bed, coffee cup on the nightstand. The life I'd been living for the past week, hiding in this anonymous room while my old life burned down around me. Rachel was right. Staying here was stupid. Okay, I said. Come get me. I'll pack. I started throwing clothes into my suitcase, not bothering to fold anything. My hand shook as I grabbed toiletries from the bathroom, checked drawers for anything I might have forgotten. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You made a mistake cooperating with the feds. My blood turned to ice. Another text. They can't protect you. We know where you are. We know everything. I dropped the phone like it had burned me, picked it up again with trembling hands and called Rachel. Someone's texting me, threatening me. Screenshot it and send it to me. I'm 5 minutes away. Do not leave that room. I screenshot the messages, sent them. My phone buzzed again. Another text. Room 1447, Peninsula Hotel. We could come up right now, walk right past that pathetic cop in the lobby. They knew my room number. They knew about the officer. A knock on the door made me jump so hard I nearly dropped my phone again. Ms. Ellison? A man's voice, unfamiliar. Hotel security. We need to talk to you about an incident. I backed away from the door. I didn't call security. We received a report of a disturbance in your room. We need to verify everything's okay. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Show me your ID. Slide it under the door. Silence. Then, ma'am, I can't do that. Please open the door. I'm not opening anything. I'm calling the front desk. I grabbed the hotel phone with shaking hands and dialed 0. It rang once, twice, 3 times. The door handle started to turn. I'd locked it. I'd put the deadbolt on, but the handle was turning anyway, like someone had a key. The front desk picked up. Front desk, how may I help you? This is room 1447. Did you send security to my room? Security? No, ma'am. Is there a problem? The deadbolt started to slide back. Someone's trying to get into my room. Call the police. Now. I dropped the hotel phone and ran to the window. 14th floor, too high to jump. No balcony, no fire escape. The door opened. 2 men stepped inside. They didn't look like hotel security. They looked like what they were. Criminals sent to silence a witness. The bigger one smiled. Miss Ellison, we just want to talk. I grabbed the lamp from the bedside table. Get out or I start screaming. Scream all you want. Your cop friend in the lobby just got called away on an emergency. Funny how those things happen. They'd lured him away. Planned this. Maybe been planning it since the moment Victor told them I'd given evidence to the SEC. The smaller man moved to the left, trying to circle around me. I backed toward the bathroom, lamp raised like a weapon. We're not going to hurt you, the big one said. We just need you to understand the situation. You talked to the feds, that was a mistake. But mistakes can be fixed if you're willing to cooperate. I'm not doing anything for you. Not even to save your own life? My back hit the bathroom door. The smaller man was getting closer. I had maybe 3 seconds before they were on me. I made a decision. I threw the lamp at the big man's head, not to hurt him, just to distract, and dove into the bathroom, slammed the door, locked it. Not that a bathroom door would stop them for long. I looked around desperately. No window, no weapon except maybe the toilet tank lid. My phone was still in my pocket. I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? 2 men broke into my hotel room at the Peninsula, room 1447. They're trying to... The bathroom door shook as someone slammed against it. Ma'am, stay on the line. Officers are on the way. Another slam. The door frame cracked. They're breaking in. Please hurry. One more hit and the door burst open. The big man stood there, no longer smiling. Behind him, I could see the hotel room in chaos. My suitcase overturned, clothes everywhere. They'd been searching for something. Give me the phone, he said. I held it behind my back. The police are coming. Then I guess we need to make this quick. He grabbed my arm. I fought back, kicking and clawing, but he was twice my size. He dragged me out of the bathroom. The smaller man had my laptop open, was going through my files, looking for evidence, looking for anything else I might have given to the feds. She's probably backed everything up, the smaller man said. This is a waste of time. Then we make sure she can't testify. Simple. He pulled something from his pocket. A syringe. I fought harder, panic giving me strength I didn't know I had. My elbow connected with his face. He cursed, loosened his grip just enough for me to wrench free. I ran for the door, made it 3 steps before he caught me again. But those 3 steps were enough for me to see the hallway, to see Rachel running toward my room with 2 police officers behind her. Mara! The big man saw them too. He shoved me hard. I fell, hitting my head on the corner of the desk. Pain exploded through my skull, white hot and disorienting. Through blurred vision, I saw the 2 men run for the window, saw one of them open it, throw something out, saw them both disappear through the door just as the police burst in. Rachel dropped to her knees beside me. Oh my God! Mara, can you hear me? I tried to answer, but the room was spinning. Warm blood trickled down my face from where I'd hit the desk. Get paramedics up here, one of the officers shouted into his radio, and put out an APB on 2 men, one approximately 6'2", one 5'10", both wearing dark clothing, last seen fleeing the Peninsula Hotel. The world tilted. Rachel's face swam in and out of focus. Stay with me, she was saying. Mara, stay awake. I wanted to tell her I was fine, that I'd survived, that they hadn't gotten whatever they came for. But darkness was creeping in at the edges of my vision, and I couldn't fight it anymore. The last thing I heard before everything went black was Rachel's voice, desperate and afraid. Don't you dare die on me, Mara! Mara! Then nothing. I woke up to fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic, the beeping of monitors. Rachel's voice, sharp and insistent, arguing with someone just outside my field of vision. I don't care what hospital policy is. She's a federal witness who was just attacked. She needs protection, not a semi-private room where anyone can walk in. Ma'am, I understand your concern, but do you? Because two men just broke into her hotel room and tried to kill her. So unless you want to explain to a federal judge why you left a witness vulnerable, I suggest you find a private room, now. I tried to speak, but my throat felt like sandpaper. The movement made pain spike through my head, sharp enough to make me gasp. Rachel was beside me instantly. Mara, thank everything. How do you feel? Like I got hit by a truck. My voice came out raspy. What happened? Concussion, 6 stitches. You've been out for about 4 hours. She squeezed my hand. You scared the hell out of me. The memories came flooding back. The texts, the men breaking in, the syringe, running for the door and not making it. Did they catch them? Rachel's expression darkened. No, they got away, but the police found the syringe they dropped. It's being analyzed now. What was in it? We don't know yet. But whatever they were planning to do to you, it wasn't going to end well. A doctor appeared, young and exhausted looking. He shined a light in my eyes, asked me questions about what year it was and who was president. Apparently I passed because he nodded and made notes on a tablet. You're lucky, he said. The head injury could have been much worse, but we want to keep you overnight for observation. Concussions can be tricky. She'll take the private room, Rachel said firmly. The doctor looked like he wanted to argue, then seemed to reconsider. I'll see what I can do. After he left, Rachel pulled a chair close to my bed. Agent Reeves has been here. She wants to talk to you as soon as you're up for it. I'm up for it now. Mara, I'm fine, and I want to know what's happening. Rachel studied me for a long moment, then pulled out her phone. I'll call her. While we waited, a nurse came in to check my vitals and adjust my IV. She was kind, efficient, and didn't ask any questions about why 2 police officers were stationed outside my door. Agent Reeves arrived 20 minutes later with her partner and a man I didn't recognize. Mid-50s, gray suit, the kind of face that had seen too much and stopped being surprised by any of it. Ms. Ellison, Reeves said, this is Assistant U.S. Attorney James Mitchell. He's prosecuting the case against your husband and his associates. Mitchell shook my hand carefully, like I might break. How are you feeling? Like someone tried to kill me. Because someone did. He pulled up a chair, sitting so we were at eye level. The substance in that syringe was a high-dose sedative, enough to knock you out for hours, possibly cause respiratory failure. If they'd managed to inject you, we'd be having a very different conversation right now, or no conversation at all. The words hung in the air. I'd known it was bad, but hearing it stated so clinically made it real in a way it hadn't been before. We arrested Thomas Liang and Robert Kellerman this morning, Reeves said. Both lawyered up immediately, haven't said a word. But we matched one of the men who attacked you to Kellerman's security detail. Ex-military, works for a private firm that Kellerman uses for his offshore operations. So they sent professionals. They sent people who know how to make problems disappear, Mitchell corrected, which means you're not safe. Not until we have everyone involved in custody. Where's Victor? I asked. Reeves and Mitchell exchanged a look. We don't know, Reeves admitted. He hasn't been to his office, his house, or any of his known associates. We have a warrant for his arrest, but he's gone underground. Rachel leaned forward. What about witness protection? WITSEC? That's a possibility, Mitchell said slowly. But it would mean relocating Ms. Ellison, giving her a new identity, complete separation from her current life. I'm not doing that, I said immediately. Mara, Rachel started. No, I've already lost my marriage, my home, my family. I'm not losing myself too. I'm not letting these people chase me into hiding. Mitchell's expression was grim. Then we need to move fast. The trial is scheduled for 6 months from now, but I'm going to petition for an expedited hearing. The sooner we get convictions, the sooner you're safe. What do you need from me? Your testimony. Everything you know, everything you saw, everything you can help us prove. And Ms. Ellison? He met my eyes. I need you to be prepared for your husband's defense team to tear you apart on the stand. They're going to paint you as a vindictive ex-wife, a scorned woman making up stories. They'll question your credibility, your motives, your intelligence. Let them, I said. I've got nothing left to lose. They kept me in the hospital for 2 days. Rachel barely left my side, working from a laptop perched on the room's small table. Agent Reeves assigned a rotating team of officers to watch my door. Nurses came and went, checking vitals and bringing food I couldn't eat because my stomach stayed in knots. On the second day, Sophie Chen from the Tribune called Rachel's cell. She wants an interview, Rachel said, looking at me. Your story, in your own words, before the trial starts. I thought we were avoiding the media. We were. But Mitchell thinks it might actually help. Get your version out there before Victor's team starts spinning their narrative. Show the public who you really are, a victim, not a conspirator. I thought about it. The last week had been nothing but other people controlling the story, reporters speculating, Victor's friends whispering, my own parents buying into the idea that I was either complicit or stupid. Set it up, I said. Sophie Chen came to the hospital that afternoon. She was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She set up a recorder on the table between us and smiled. Thank you for agreeing to talk, she said. I know this is difficult. You wrote that I might have known about Victor's crimes, I said. Before we start, I need you to understand something. I didn't know. I trusted my husband, and he used that trust to hide what he was doing. That doesn't make me stupid. It makes him a liar. Sophie's smile faded. You're right. That line in my article was unfair. I'm sorry. The apology surprised me. Okay. So let's start at the beginning. When did you first suspect something was wrong? For the next 2 hours, I told her everything. The suspicious texts, hiring Marcus, following Victor to the hotel, the video evidence, the federal investigation, the attack. Sophie took notes, asked pointed questions, pushed back when something didn't make sense. She wasn't gentle, but she was fair. And when I finished, she sat back and shook her head. This is going to be front page, she said. The wife who caught her husband cheating and accidentally uncovered a massive fraud scheme. It's incredible. It's my life, I said quietly. I know. And I'm going to make sure people understand that. You're not a supporting character in Victor Hale's story. You're the person who stopped him. The article ran 3 days later, the morning I was finally discharged from the hospital. The headline read, The Woman Who Brought Down Victor Hale, Mara Ellison Speaks. Rachel read it to me in the car on the way to the safe house the FBI had arranged, a condo in a bland residential building, the kind of place no one looked at twice. The article was everything Sophie had promised. Detailed, fair, focused on my perspective instead of Victor's crimes. It painted me not as a scorned wife or a clueless fool, but as a woman who trusted the wrong person and then found the courage to do the right thing. By noon, it had been picked up by national outlets. By evening, #Team Mara was trending on social media. People are on your side, Rachel said, scrolling through her phone. Listen to this. Mara Ellison is a hero for standing up to her criminal husband. More women should have this courage. And this one, can't believe people tried to blame her for not knowing. Abusers are experts at hiding who they really are. I'm not a hero, I said. I just told the truth. In a system that usually protects men like Victor, that makes you a hero to a lot of people. The safe house was small but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen stocked with basics, windows that overlooked a parking lot. Not exactly glamorous, but it was secure. And after the attack, security mattered more than comfort. Rachel stayed with me the first week, working remotely and keeping me company. We fell into a routine. Coffee in the morning. Work during the day, Rachel on divorce proceedings, me on preparing for testimony, dinner in the evening, usually takeout from restaurants that delivered, TV at night, mindless shows that let us not think for a while. It was during one of these evenings, a week into my stay, that Agent Reeves called with news. We found Victor, she said without preamble. I sat up straighter. Where? Miami, trying to board a private plane to the Cayman Islands. We arrested him an hour ago. Relief flooded through me. Is he talking? Not yet, but we found something interesting when we searched him, a burner phone with text messages between him and someone he calls L. We think it's Thomas Liang. The messages discuss you specifically. My stomach tightened. What do they say? They discuss ways to discredit you, planting evidence that you knew about the fraud, potentially paying off witnesses to testify that you were involved in the financial operations. But I wasn't. We know that. But Victor was building a defense that would have destroyed your credibility and possibly gotten you charged as an accomplice. If we hadn't caught him, if those messages had been deleted, we never would have known. I closed my eyes. Even in the end, even caught and desperate, Victor had been planning to throw me under the bus to save himself. There's more, Reeves continued. The man who attacked you at the hotel? We got him. He's cooperating, gave up Kellerman in exchange for a reduced sentence. He confirmed that Kellerman ordered the hit, wanted you sedated and disappeared before you could testify. Disappeared, I repeated. You mean killed. The sedative would have made it look like an accidental overdose. Easy to explain. Depressed woman going through a messy divorce, struggling with the stress, takes too many pills, case closed. They'd had it all planned out. My death, the cover story, the narrative that would have painted me as unstable rather than a threat. When's the trial? I asked. Mitchell got his expedited hearing 3 weeks. Can you be ready? I thought about everything I'd lost, everything they'd tried to take from me, everything I'd fought to keep. I'll be ready. The next 3 weeks were intensive preparation. Mitchell and his team drilled me on testimony, threw every possible question at me that Victor's lawyers might ask. They prepared me for character attacks, for implications that I was lying, for suggestions that I was motivated by revenge rather than truth. They're going to make you cry if they can, Mitchell warned. Make you look emotional and irrational. Don't give them that. Stay calm, stick to facts, don't get defensive. We practiced, again and again, until I could recite dates and transactions and conversations without hesitation, until I could hear myself being called vindictive, stupid, complicit without flinching. Rachel filed the final divorce papers. With Victor in custody and unable to contest them, the process moved faster. A judge granted a preliminary order freezing all assets pending the criminal trial's outcome. My parents called once, my mother crying, asking me to reconsider testifying. He's going to prison anyway, she said. The evidence is overwhelming. You don't need to put yourself through a trial. I need to look him in the eye and tell the truth, I said. I need him to hear it from me. Mara, please. Mom, I love you, but if you can't support me in this, then we don't have anything else to talk about. I hung up before she could respond. It hurt less than I expected. Maybe I'd finally used up all my capacity for pain. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I paced the safe house, went over my testimony notes for the 100th time, checked and rechecked my outfit for the next day. A simple navy suit Rachel had bought me, professional but not flashy. At 2 a.m., Rachel found me sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by papers. You're going to be amazing tomorrow, she said, sitting down beside me. What if I'm not? What if I freeze up there? What if I mess up the timeline or get confused about the accounts? Then you say you don't remember and move on. Mara, you're not responsible for convicting Victor. The evidence does that. You're just responsible for telling your truth. My truth almost got me killed, and now it's going to put him away. She bumped my shoulder with hers. You've come so far from that woman at the gala, the one who was so afraid of making waves that she almost let him get away with everything. I'm still afraid. Being afraid doesn't make you weak. Going forward anyway makes you brave. The trial began at 9 a.m. in federal court, a building of marble and authority that made me feel small walking through its doors. Media had camped outside, cameras everywhere, reporters shouting questions. Rachel and Agent Reeves flanked me, creating a barrier as we pushed through. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Spectators, journalists, Victor's former colleagues trying to distance themselves from the scandal, and Victor himself, sitting at the defense table between two expensive lawyers. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him. His suit hung loose on his frame, and his hair had gone grayer at the temples. When our eyes met across the courtroom, his expression was unreadable. The prosecution's opening statement was devastating. Mitchell laid out the scheme in clear, simple language. The fake conferences, the shell companies, the $32 million embezzled over 6 years, the offshore accounts, the attempts to intimidate and silence witnesses. Victor's lawyer countered with the expected defense, a successful businessman facing baseless accusations from a vindictive ex-wife and overzealous federal agents, a man whose only crime was being too trusting of his associates. They called me to the stand on the second day. I walked to the witness box on legs that trembled, placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. The whole courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Mitchell started with easy questions. My name, how long I'd been married to Victor, my education and background, establishing me as credible, sympathetic. Then the harder questions. When had I first suspected the affair? What made me hire an investigator? What did I see in the hotel room that night? I answered each one carefully, sticking to facts. My voice stayed steady. I didn't cry. Then came the cross-examination. Victor's lawyer, a woman named Patricia Sterling, with a reputation for destroying witnesses, approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mrs. Hale, excuse me, Ms. Ellison, you claim you had no knowledge of your husband's business activities? That's correct. And yet you lived in a house worth $4 million, wore jewelry worth hundreds of thousands, traveled internationally several times a year. Yes. And it never occurred to you to question where that money came from. I trusted my husband. I believed he had a successful business. Or perhaps you simply didn't want to know? Sterling's voice sharpened. Because knowing would have meant losing access to that lifestyle you enjoyed so much? Mitchell objected. The judge sustained, but the question hung in the air. Sterling tried again. Isn't it true that you only filed for divorce after learning about the federal investigation? No, I filed for divorce after discovering my husband's affair. How convenient that your discovery coincided with the investigation becoming public. I didn't know about the investigation until after I'd already caught him cheating and documented it. So you say. But we only have your word for that timeline, don't we? You have the date stamps on the evidence I provided. The video was recorded the night of the gala, days before the investigation went public. Sterling paused, consulted her notes. You hired a private investigator to follow your husband. That suggests premeditation, doesn't it? Planning? It suggests I suspected my husband was cheating and wanted proof. Or it suggests you were looking for leverage, a way to secure a larger divorce settlement by creating a scandal. Objection, Mitchell said. Speculation. Sustained. But Sterling wasn't done. Miss Ellison, isn't it true that you stand to gain millions from your divorce settlement if your husband is convicted? I stand to get what's rightfully mine under the prenuptial agreement we both signed. An agreement that heavily favors you if infidelity is proven. How fortunate that you have video evidence of that infidelity. I didn't create his affair. I just documented it. Or staged it? Hired an actress to play the mistress? Created a scenario that would give you grounds for a lucrative divorce? The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. Sloane Carter is a real person with a real job at Whitman and Cross. You can verify that easily. We have, but we can't verify what arrangement you might have made with her to create this elaborate story. Mitchell was on his feet. Your Honor, defense counsel is engaged in pure fantasy. There's no evidence to support these accusations. Ms. Sterling, the judge said wearily, do you have actual questions for the witness, or are you just making speeches? Sterling smiled. I'm simply establishing that Ms. Ellison had motive, means, and opportunity to fabricate evidence against her husband in pursuit of financial gain. By documenting a federal crime I didn't know existed, I said. That's an impressive level of planning for someone you're also calling too stupid to notice her husband was embezzling millions. The courtroom rippled with quiet laughter. Sterling's smile tightened. No further questions, she said. I stepped down from the witness box, my legs shaking but my head high. I'd done it. Survived cross-examination without breaking, without giving them the emotional outburst they wanted. The trial continued for another week. Marcus testified about his surveillance. Agent Reeves presented the evidence from the thumb drive. Financial experts broke down the shell companies and offshore accounts. And finally, Robert Kellerman's security guard testified about being ordered to attack me. About the syringe, the plan to make it look like suicide, the deliberate attempt to silence a witness. Victor's face throughout this testimony was stone. But I saw his hands gripping the table edge, knuckles white with tension. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they came back, the courtroom was silent. The forewoman stood, paper trembling slightly in her hands. On the count of wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of embezzlement, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of money laundering, we find the defendant guilty. 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 15 counts in total, each one another nail in the coffin of Victor's freedom. He didn't react, just sat there, staring straight ahead, while his lawyers frantically took notes and the courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge banged his gavel. Mr. Hale, you are remanded into custody pending sentencing. Bail is revoked. Federal marshals moved forward. Victor stood slowly, and for just a moment his eyes found mine across the courtroom. I waited for anger, for hatred, for some final attempt to make me the villain in his story. Instead, he just looked defeated, empty, like a man who'd gambled everything and lost. They led him away in handcuffs, and I felt nothing but relief. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. This time, I didn't run from them. "Ms. Ellison, how do you feel about the verdict?" Justice was served today. Not just for me, but for everyone Victor Hale stole from. "What's next for you?" "I'm going to rebuild my life. On my own terms this time." "Any message for other women in similar situations?" I paused, thinking about all the women who'd reached out over the past weeks, sharing their own stories of betrayal, of manipulation, of finally finding the courage to leave. "Trust your instincts," I said. "If something feels wrong, it probably is. And you deserve better than a man who makes you doubt yourself." That night, back at the safe house, Rachel and I opened a bottle of wine, cheap, from the corner store. Nothing like the vintages Victor used to serve at dinner parties. "To new beginnings," Rachel said, raising her glass. "To truth," I countered, "and to the people brave enough to tell it." We drank, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Victor was sentenced 3 weeks later. 25 years in federal prison, with restitution ordered to all parties he'd defrauded. The house, the cars, the art collection, all seized and liquidated to pay back what he'd stolen. I got nothing from the marital assets. They were proceeds of crime, every dollar tainted. But I got something better. I got myself back. The version of me that existed before Victor, before I'd learned to make myself smaller to fit into someone else's life. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday afternoon in a judge's chambers. No ceremony, no spectators, just paperwork and signatures and a final stamp that made it official. Mara Ellison again. No longer Victor Hale's wife, no longer anyone's wife, just myself. Rachel took me to dinner afterward, a small Italian place that didn't care about my notoriety or my scandal. We ate pasta and drank too much wine and laughed about nothing important. "What are you going to do now?" Rachel asked. I'd been thinking about that, about the future that stretched ahead, blank and terrifying and full of possibility. "I'm going to write a book," I said, "about everything that happened, not for money or attention, just to tell the story the way it actually was." "People will read it," Rachel said. "Your story matters." "Maybe. Or maybe it'll just help me make sense of it all. Either way, it's mine to tell." We finished dinner and walked out into Chicago's spring evening. The city looked different now, less intimidating, less like a place where I had to perform, and more like a place where I could just exist. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie Chen. "Saw the sentencing. You did it. You actually did it." I smiled and typed back, "We did it. Thank you for telling the truth." Another text came in, this one from an unknown number. "This is Patricia Drummond. I owe you an apology. And an explanation. Coffee sometime?" The gossip queen herself, reaching out not to spread rumors, but to apologize. Maybe people could change after all. I replied, "Coffee sounds good. I'll call you next week." Rachel drove me back to the safe house, but I didn't go inside right away. I stood outside, looking up at the stars barely visible through Chicago's light pollution, and thought about everything I'd survived. The betrayal, the attack, the trial, the loss of everything I thought defined me. And somehow, impossibly, I'd come through it. Scarred, but standing. Broken, but healing. Victor was in prison. His accomplices were facing their own trials. The truth was out there, documented and undeniable. I'd won. Not because I'd destroyed him, though I had. Not because I'd gotten revenge, though maybe I had that too. I'd won because I'd refused to disappear, refused to be silenced, refused to let them make me the villain in a story where I was the victim. I pulled out my phone one more time and opened my notes app, typed a single line, Chapter 1. The night I stopped being someone's wife and started being myself. Tomorrow I'd start writing. I'd tell the whole story, every painful detail, every moment of doubt and fear and rage. But tonight, I'd just stand here under these stars and breathe, free. The book took 6 months to write. 6 months of sitting at a borrowed laptop in the safe house, then later in the small apartment Rachel helped me find in a quiet neighborhood far from the Lincoln Park mansion I used to call home. 6 months of reliving every moment, every betrayal, every decision that had led me from that glittering ballroom to this cramped one-bedroom with secondhand furniture and walls thin enough to hear my neighbor's television. but it was mine. The apartment, the furniture, the story I was telling, all of it earned, not given, not bought with stolen money or maintained through convenient ignorance. Rachel read the first draft on a Friday night, curled up on my secondhand couch with a glass of wine and a box of tissues. When she finished, her eyes were red. "This is going to change lives," she said. "Women are going to read this and recognize themselves, recognize the warning signs they missed, or they'll think I'm an idiot for not seeing it sooner. Some will, but the ones who matter won't." She handed me back the manuscript. "You need to publish this, Mara, not self-publish. Get a real agent, a real publisher. Make this as big as the scandal was." I'd been thinking about that, about taking this private pain and making it public, about putting my name on something that would follow me forever. "What if Victor sues?" I asked. "Let him try from prison. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, and you've got video evidence, court transcripts, and a conviction to back up every word." Rachel leaned forward. "Besides, his lawyer fees are going to bankrupt what's left of his accounts. He's not suing anyone." She was right. Victor had lost everything in the trial: his company, his assets, his reputation. Even his mother had stopped taking his calls after the guilty verdict came down. I thought about the last time I'd seen him, in the courtroom at sentencing, 25 years. He'd be 71 when he got out, if he lived that long. His entire life reduced to a number, a cautionary tale, a Wikipedia entry about fraud and hubris. Part of me felt sorry for him. A small part. The part that remembered good moments before everything turned toxic. But mostly, I felt nothing. He'd made his choices. Now he lived with them. "Okay," I said. "I'll look for an agent." The literary agent I found was a woman named Carmen Torres, who specialized in memoirs and women's stories. She read my manuscript in 2 days and called with an offer of representation before the weekend was out. "This is powerful," Carmen said on the phone, her voice sharp with excitement. "Raw, honest, unflinching. I can sell this. But I need to know, are you prepared for what comes next? Because if we do this right, you're going to be everywhere. Every talk show, every podcast, every book club in America is going to want you." I looked around my small apartment, at the life I'd built from nothing, at the woman I'd become through necessity and pain and stubborn refusal to disappear. "I'm ready," I said. Carmen sold the book in a 3-publisher auction 2 weeks later. The advance was enough to make me gasp when she told me the number. Not Victor-level money, but honest money. Money I'd earned by surviving and telling the truth. "They want to publish fast," Carmen said. 6 months from contract to bookstores. Can you handle that timeline?" "I've handled worse." The next 6 months were a blur of edits, fact-checking, legal reviews. The publisher's lawyers went through every line, confirming every claim, making sure nothing could come back to bite us. They verified dates against court transcripts, cross-referenced my account of events with testimony and evidence. Everything checked out, because I'd told the truth. The book launched on a Tuesday in October, exactly 1 year after that night at the Grandmont Hotel. The night everything changed. My publisher threw a launch party at a bookstore in downtown Chicago. I almost didn't go. The idea of standing in front of people, of being seen and judged and discussed, made my stomach twist. But Rachel insisted. "You're not hiding anymore, remember? You're the woman who took down Victor Hale. Act like it." So I put on a simple black dress, not designer, bought off the rack at Nordstrom with my own money, and went to my own book launch. The store was packed. I recognized some faces from the trial. Sophie Chen from the Tribune, a few of Victor's former colleagues who'd been smart enough to cooperate with investigators. And women. So many women, holding advance copies of my book, waiting to meet me. Carmen introduced me to scattered applause. I walked to the podium on shaking legs, looked out at the crowd, and almost froze. Then I saw Rachel in the front row, giving me a thumbs up. And next to her, Marcus Chen, who'd started this whole thing by following my husband through Chicago's streets and documenting the truth. I cleared my throat and began. A year ago, I was someone else. I was Victor Hale's wife, the perfect accessory to his perfect life. I smiled at the right people, wore the right clothes, asked no questions. I made myself small enough to fit into the space he'd decided I should occupy. The room was silent. "That woman is dead now." She died the night I kicked down a hotel room door and refused to look away from what I found. She died again, in a federal building, telling the truth even when it would have been easier to stay silent. She died every day for a year as I rebuilt myself from nothing. I paused, looked down at the book in front of me. This is her eulogy and my resurrection. This is the story of how I stopped being someone's wife and became myself. And if you're reading this because you see yourself in my story, if you recognize the warning signs I missed, the red flags I ignored, the ways I made excuses for behavior that should have been inexcusable, then this is for you too. You deserve better. You deserve truth. You deserve a life where you don't have to make yourself smaller to make someone else feel bigger. And if my story helps even one person find the courage to walk away, to speak up, to refuse to disappear, then everything I went through was worth it. The applause started before I finished, building until it filled the bookstore and spilled out onto the street. The book hit the New York Times bestseller list in its first week. By week 2, it was #1. Interview requests flooded in. Morning shows, late night, podcasts, magazines. Carmen fielded them all, choosing carefully. We said yes to the ones that would tell my story right, no to the ones that wanted scandal without substance. I went on Morning America first. The host, a woman named Jessica North with kind eyes and sharp questions, sat across from me in the studio and didn't pull punches. Some critics have said you're profiting from your victimhood, she said, that you're using your trauma for book sales. What do you say to that? I'd say they're half right, I replied. I am profiting from this book, but not from victimhood, from survival, from refusing to let what happened to me define me. The money I'm making? It's the first honest money I've earned in 8 years, and I'm using it to rebuild a life based on truth instead of lies. You dedicate the book to women who stay silent. Why? Because I was one of them. For years, I suspected something was wrong, but convinced myself I was being paranoid. I ignored my instincts because acknowledging them meant admitting my life was built on lies. That's what silence does. It protects the lie at the expense of the truth. I want women to know that their instincts matter, that doubt isn't paranoia, and that leaving takes more courage than staying ever will. The interview went viral. By that evening, #TrustYourInstincts was trending on social media. Women shared their own stories of leaving bad relationships, of trusting their gut, of rebuilding after betrayal. I read every message I could, each one a reminder that my pain had purpose, that my story mattered beyond just me. 3 weeks after the book launched, I got an unexpected call. My mother. We hadn't spoken since before the trial. She'd made her choice, stand by family reputation over her daughter's truth. I'd accepted it and moved on. Mara? Her voice was small, uncertain. I read your book. I waited. I'm sorry, she continued. I'm so sorry for not believing you, for choosing what people would think over what you needed. Mom, let me finish. Please. She took a shaky breath. Your father and I, we built our life on appearances, on maintaining the right image, knowing the right people. When your marriage fell apart so publicly, I panicked. I thought about what people would say, what it would mean for our reputation. I never thought about what you were going through. You called me selfish, I said quietly, for not protecting Victor. I know, and I was wrong. You weren't selfish, you were brave. You stood up for yourself when no one else would, including me. I'm ashamed of that. The apology didn't erase the hurt, but it helped. Thank you for saying that, I said. Can we have coffee? Just talk? I thought about it, about whether I wanted to rebuild this relationship or let it stay broken, about forgiveness and boundaries and what I owed to people who'd failed me. Coffee sounds good, I said finally. But Mom, things are different now. I'm different. I'm not going to go back to being the daughter who makes herself smaller to make you comfortable. I don't want you to. I want to know the daughter I should have been supporting all along. We met the following week at a small cafe near my apartment. My mother looked older than I remembered, more fragile. She hugged me carefully, like I might break. You look good, she said. Different, but good. I am different. We ordered coffee and sat by the window. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. I read what you wrote about us, about feeling like you had to be perfect to earn our love. You never said I wasn't enough. But you never said I was either. Everything was always about image, about what people would think. I learned to perform instead of just being. I know. And I'm sorry for that too. She squeezed my hand. Your father, he's having a harder time with all this. The publicity, the scandal, his friends asking questions. But he read the book too. He won't admit it changed anything, but I see it did. He doesn't have to admit anything. I'm not looking for his approval anymore. I know, and maybe that's what finally got through to him, that you don't need us to validate your choices. We talked for 2 hours about the book, about the trial, about the life I was building, about her marriage to my father, the compromises she'd made, the ways she'd learned to swallow her own needs. Don't make my mistakes, she said as we were leaving. Don't wait until you're 60 to figure out who you are without a man defining you. I won't, I promised. I already know who I am. The book tour took me across the country. Bookstores in every major city, sometimes 2 events a day. I met thousands of women, heard hundreds of stories that echoed my own. In Boston, a woman in her 50s told me she'd left her husband of 30 years after reading my book. I'd been making excuses for him for decades, she said. Your story made me realize I was allowed to stop. In Seattle, a college student told me she'd broken up with her boyfriend because of red flags she'd been ignoring. He wasn't stealing money or cheating, but he made me feel small. Your book made me see that was enough reason to leave. In Miami, an older woman pressed a note into my hand. I read it later, in my hotel room. Thank you for showing my daughter that she deserves better. She left her abusive husband last month. You saved her life. Each story reminded me why I'd written the book, why I'd chosen to expose my pain instead of hiding it. 6 months into the tour, I was in Los Angeles for a speaking engagement when Carmen called with news. There's a production company interested in adapting your book. They want to make it into a limited series. For television? Streaming. They're talking prestige, A-list talent, serious money. But they want you involved. As a consultant, maybe executive producer. They want to make sure the story stays true. I thought about my story being dramatized, turned into entertainment. It felt strange, but also right somehow. Another way to reach people, to show them they weren't alone. Set up the meeting, I said. The streaming deal came through 3 months later. I signed on as executive producer, with full creative control over the script. The money was more than I'd ever imagined having, the kind of money that would have meant nothing when I was married to Victor, but meant everything now because I'd earned it myself. I used part of it to start a foundation, the Ellison Foundation for Women's Financial Independence. It provided legal support, financial education, and emergency funds for women leaving abusive or controlling relationships. Rachel helped me set it up, navigate the legal requirements, establish the board. We hired staff, rented office space, started taking applications. The first grant we approved was for a woman named Sarah, 34, with 2 kids. Her husband controlled all their finances, gave her no access to accounts, no money of her own. She wanted to leave but had nothing to start over with. We paid for her lawyer, first month's rent on an apartment, childcare while she looked for work, financial counseling to help her rebuild her credit. 6 months later, she sent me a photo of her kids in their new apartment smiling. The note said, "You gave me back my life. I'll never forget that." That's when I knew the foundation mattered more than the book, more than the television deal, more than any of it. This was the legacy I wanted to build. A year and a half after the book launched, I was invited back to the Grandmont Hotel for a women's leadership conference. The irony wasn't lost on me. Returning to the place where everything had started, where I'd kicked down that door and begun the process of reclaiming myself. The ballroom looked the same. Crystal chandeliers, gold-flecked walls, marble floors that reflected fractured light. But I felt different walking through it. I wasn't performing anymore. Wasn't trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect daughter, the perfect anything. I was just myself, flawed, fierce, and finally free. The conference organizers wanted me to give the keynote speech. I stood at the same podium where Victor had once held court, looked out at an audience of women instead of his business associates, and told a different story than the one I'd been living when I was last here. 18 months ago, I stood in this room and watched my life fall apart, I began. I followed my husband to a hotel room upstairs and discovered he was having an affair. But that affair, as painful as it was, became the door that led me to the truth about who I'd married and who I'd become. I paused, looking at the faces watching me. Young women just starting their careers, older women who'd survived their own betrayals. All of them looking for something: inspiration, validation, hope. Here's what I learned. You can survive anything if you're willing to tell the truth about it. Not the comfortable truth. Not the truth that makes you look good. The real, messy, painful truth. The truth that you married the wrong person, that you ignored red flags, that you made yourself smaller to fit into someone else's vision of who you should be. But surviving isn't the same as thriving. Surviving is just getting through the day. Thriving is building something new from the wreckage. It's taking the pain and the fear and the anger and turning it into purpose. I wrote a book, started a foundation, helped hundreds of women find the courage to leave situations that were destroying them. That's thriving, and it only happened because I stopped hiding from the truth and started using it as a foundation to build something better. The applause was thunderous. Women stood, some crying, all of them clapping. After the speech, the conference organizers asked if I'd be willing to do a meet and greet. I spent 2 hours talking to women, signing books, listening to stories. Each conversation reminded me why I'd fought so hard to tell mine. As I was leaving, one of the hotel managers approached me, an older man, distinguished, with kind eyes. "Ms. Ellison, I'm Robert Chen, General Manager. I wanted to apologize for what happened here 18 months ago. In one of our rooms on our property, we've since implemented stricter security protocols." I smiled. "You're not responsible for my husband's choices, or for the men who attacked me. You're just responsible for running a hotel. Still, I wanted you to know we've been following your story, what you've built from such a difficult situation. It's inspiring. Thank you." He handed me a card. "If you ever need anything, a room for your foundation events, space for meetings, please let us know. We'd be honored to support your work." I took the card, touched by the gesture. The Grandmont Hotel had been the site of my worst moment. Maybe it could also be a place where something good grew. That night, I went back to my apartment and found a package waiting. No return address, just my name in careful handwriting. Inside was a letter. I recognized the handwriting before I read the first word. Victor. My hands shook as I opened it. "Mara, I know I have no right to contact you. I know what I did, what I took from you, what I destroyed. This isn't an attempt to justify any of it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I read your book. One of the other inmates got a copy, and it made its way to me. I've read it 3 times now. Each time, I see more clearly what I couldn't see when we were married. That I didn't love you the way you deserved. That I used you as decoration, as proof of my success, as an accessory to the life I was building. You wrote that you made yourself smaller to fit into my life. You're right. And I encouraged it because it was easier than dealing with a partner who challenged me or asked questions or expected more than I was willing to give. I destroyed our marriage long before I started the affair, long before I started stealing money. I destroyed it every time I chose my ego over your needs, my image over your truth. You were right to leave, right to testify, right to tell your story. Everything you did was the right thing, and everything I did was wrong. I know that now. Too late. But I know it. I hope you're happy. I hope you've built something better from the ashes of what we had. And I hope someday you can think of our marriage as a lesson learned rather than years wasted. I'm sorry. For all of it. For who I was and what I did and the pain I caused. Victor." I read the letter twice, then a third time. Looking for manipulation, for some hidden agenda, but it felt genuine, raw. Honest in a way Victor had never been when we were married. Did it change anything? No. Did it erase the betrayal? No. Did it make up for the lies, the theft, the affair, the attempt on my life? Absolutely not. But it did give me something I hadn't realized I needed. Closure. Victor finally saw me. Finally understood what he'd lost. And that acknowledgement, that admission of guilt from a man who'd spent our entire marriage refusing to admit he was ever wrong, felt like the final piece clicking into place. I folded the letter, put it in a drawer, and moved on with my life. The foundation grew. Within 2 years, we'd helped over 500 women leave dangerous situations and start over. We partnered with law firms, financial advisors, therapists, created a network of support that caught women when they jumped. The television adaptation premiered to critical acclaim. I watched it with Rachel in my apartment, both of us crying as an actress I'd helped cast portrayed my lowest moments with devastating accuracy. "It's weird seeing your life played out like this," I said. "It's powerful," Rachel corrected, "and it's going to help so many people." She was right. The show sparked conversations about financial abuse, about coercive control, about the ways men use money and power to trap women. It became required viewing in domestic violence counseling sessions, in law school classes, in corporate training about ethics. My story stopped being just mine and became part of a larger conversation. 3 years after that night at the Grandmont Hotel, I stood in the same ballroom once again. But this time, it was for the Foundation's annual gala. The event I'd planned, the guests I'd invited, the money we'd raised to help even more women break free. Patricia Drummond was there. We'd become unlikely friends after her apology turned into regular coffee dates where she shared gossip that was actually useful, which women in our social circle might need help, which men showed warning signs. Sophie Chen covered the event for the Tribune. Marcus Chen donated investigative services for women who needed evidence to leave. My mother attended with my father, who'd softened over the years. He'd never apologize, that wasn't who he was, but he'd started writing checks to the Foundation, his way of admitting he'd been wrong. Rachel stood beside me at the podium as we announced that year's grant recipients. My best friend, my lawyer, my sister, in every way that mattered. 3 years ago, I said to the crowd, I was in this room living a lie. I thought I had everything, money, status, security, but I had nothing that mattered. No truth, no autonomy, no sense of who I was beyond my husband's wife. Tonight, I'm here living my truth, and I've learned that truth is worth more than any amount of money stolen from offshore accounts. Truth is the foundation everything else is built on, and when you build on truth instead of lies, what you create actually lasts. I looked around the ballroom, at the women who'd used our grants to escape, at the volunteers who staffed our helpline, at the donors who believed in giving women a second chance. This foundation exists because I refused to be silent about what happened to me, because I turned my pain into purpose, and because I finally learned that the only person's approval I needed was my own. The applause filled the ballroom, but I barely heard it, because across the room I saw someone I hadn't expected. Sloane Carter. Standing near the back, looking uncomfortable but determined. After the speeches ended and the formal part of the evening wound down, she approached me carefully. "Ms. Ellison, I wasn't sure if I should come, but I wanted to thank you." "Thank me? For what?" "For showing me what I'd become. I read your book, saw myself in it, not just as the mistress, but as someone who'd compromised everything I believed in for a man who was using me just like he used you." She looked down at her hands. "I lost my job at Whitman and Cross. My reputation was destroyed. I had to move to a different city and start over. I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was the best thing that could have happened. I was 28 and thought sleeping with a powerful married man would advance my career. I was stupid and selfish, and I hurt you terribly. Your book made me see that." She pulled out an envelope. "I can't undo what I did, but I can help make sure other women don't make the same mistakes. This is for your foundation. It's not much, but it's honest money. Money I earned at my new job where I got promoted based on merit instead of who I was willing to betray." I took the envelope, stunned. Inside was a check for $5,000. "Thank you," I said quietly. "No, thank you, for not destroying me when you could have, for telling your story in a way that made me confront mine, for building something good from something terrible." She walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the crowd. I stood there holding the check, thinking about forgiveness and redemption and the complicated ways people change. Later that night, after the gala ended and the guests went home, I walked out onto the hotel's terrace. The same terrace where I'd stood 18 months ago, preparing to follow Victor upstairs. Chicago stretched out below me, lights glittering in the darkness. Somewhere in this city, Victor was in a federal prison. Somewhere else, women were reading my book and finding courage. Somewhere, someone was making the decision to leave, to speak up, to refuse to disappear. And I was here, alive, free, myself. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app, found the line I'd written 3 years ago. Chapter 1, the night I stopped being someone's wife and started being myself. Below it, I typed a new line. Epilogue, the night I realized that becoming myself was just the beginning, because that's what I'd learned. That survival isn't an ending, It's a beginning. That rebuilding isn't about getting back to who you were before. It's about discovering who you're capable of becoming. I'd lost everything: the house, the money, the marriage, the life I thought I wanted. And in losing it all, I'd found something infinitely more valuable. I'd found myself. Not the perfect wife, not the obedient daughter, not the woman who made herself small to fit into someone else's vision. Just Mara, complicated, imperfect, fierce, and free. That woman was worth more than anything Victor Hale's stolen millions could have bought. That woman was worth fighting for. And I'd fight for her every day for the rest of my life. I looked up at the Chicago skyline one last time, then turned and walked back inside. Back to my life, my foundation, my truth. Back to myself. And I'd never felt more powerful.